All week I was looking forward to today because I thought today was the feast of Blessed Sloanus Casey, and it's not. It was yesterday. I made a mistake on my date. It fell on a Sunday, so he got bumped off the calendar this year. Sloanus Casey, as you know, was the second American-born blessed male, right? So I think Elizabeth Ann Seton was the first female to be beatified, born on American soil, and Sloanus Casey is the second. He was beatified in 2017, and he was beat out by Father Stanley Rutherford by just 1 month, which I thought was really unfair, considering that Solanus had been working so long on his canonization, and then Stanley kind of slipped in there and stole the honor away of being the first born American blessed of the church. And I guess Solanus would have had a problem with that, knowing his humility. When I visited the shrine of Blessed Stanley Rutherford, Rother, I kept saying, I always say his last name wrong, Rother. I forgave him when I went to the shrine, because when I walked into the beautiful little museum they have of Blessed Stanley, there was a beautiful tribute to Solanus Casey, because the night that he was martyred, he was found with a relic of Father Solanus with him. So I forgave him. We're on good terms now, myself and Father Stanley. And Blessed Sloanus Casey lived in Detroit, he lived in Huntington, but we cannot overlook the fact, he's from Wisconsin, but we can overlook the fact his miracles began when he lived in New York. So we just have to say that, make it clear, as when he was living in Harlem and the Lower East Side than Yonkers, where the miracles began, and they began to watch carefully because this guy would produce anywhere from 12 to 25 miracles a day. That were just astounding. But I'll save that homily for another day, because today we celebrate a different saint on the calendar, who I was hoping we'd get bumped off because of Solanus, but he doesn't, and that's Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. Now, the Jesuits were having a magnificent force in the church for good for so many centuries. Unfortunately, we're seeing the end of the great reign of the Jesuits. Hopefully, we'll see the resurgence of the Jesuit order, where they enter into a conversion back to the Catholic faith. Not all of them are bad. Not all of them. I've had been a very few good Jesuits. Among them, certainly Father John Hardin, who should be canonized as saint. When I met him back in the 90s, it was similar to when I met Mother Teresa. His eyes was just so pure and so clear, like looking to the very face of God. Very beautiful, holy soul. I also had two great Jesuits, one who taught me Latin, the other one who taught me Greek, and they were phenomenal Jesuits. They were both cards too. They both had a particular personality that was quite hysterical. They had no problem preaching the truth. I think they were good Jesuits that way. Father Reed, who taught me Latin, he told me I would drive him back and forth to the Jesuit school to the seminary to teach. And in this car he'd tell me stories, and his nephew got married in some sort of ecumenical service, but he had permission from the church, and so he had to be there as the priest, and they asked him to preach. So here he is preaching at his nephew's wedding, who's getting married outside the church, in a Protestant church, with permission though, and how it all worked out. So he decided he was going to preach on the evils of Protestantism and why all should be Catholics. He said he figured he'd hit one in for the home team. He just went at it and said, oh, okay, I guess it was a great wedding homily, I don't know. I don't know if that was pastorally appropriate, but it was that old school Jesuit, you know. My Greek teacher, Father Kelly, I said to him, I used to drive him too, and I said to him one day, I said, I'm praying to St. Lawrence of Brindisi for infused knowledge of Greek. He said, ha, try St. Jude, the saint of hopeless cases, which should tell you something about my grades in Greek. Anyway, the beautiful Jesuit ordinance brought so many beautiful things into the church. I have to say, even though they stole various things from the Franciscans, we all love that prayer of St. Ignatius, right? That beautiful prayer, I can't even think of it right now, but everyone thinks, oh, the St. Ignatius prayer, written by a Franciscan 100 years earlier. Sorry, he liked the prayer, it became popular through him, but it's a Franciscan prayer that the Jesuits stole. That little IHS symbol that they use, oh, that's a Jesuit symbol. Saint Bernardine of Siena created the IHS 200 years before, 150 years before Ignatius. Sorry, Ignatius, but we have to just speak the truth here. It's a Franciscan symbol, the IHS. Just saying, they stole a lot. However, a great force in the church, the Jesuits. St. Ignatius was a man whose life begins really not in the faith. It really begins as a man, although born and raised Catholic, he got into his military career, and a very good military officer, and was very much in the world, very worldly, not a very moral man, you could say. And it wasn't until he was wounded by a cannonball and his leg was severely damaged that he was lying in the hospital recovering, and he wanted some of his books brought to him about novels of heroes and all this other stuff. And they didn't have any of those in the hospital. All they had was the lives of the saints. And so he had to start reading the lives of the saints. And it was reading the lives of the saints that he began to realize like how much reading the lives of the saints and looking at these men and thinking to himself, if I was to do what they did, what would my life be? And this spiritual reading led him to contemplate the truths of the faith. It led him to contemplate what would it be like if he actually did what these actual people did, right? And then he thought about the other stories and how it left him. And he thought about his old stories of chivalry and knight. In the end, it was kind of like, yeah, okay, blah. This was like, oh my goodness, there's peace in this, there's joy in this. This actually has a direction. It has an end. The end being union with God. Right? And he noticed within himself this distinction, and eventually this became the fodder for him creating his principles of discernment, but it was the beginning of it, right? But it was spiritual reading that led him out of this fog, of this sin, to really come to truly know God, right? And eventually he goes on to establish the Jesuit order, and that's a whole other homily in itself, but an incredible force for the church, for going forth and bringing souls to Christ through the missions and then forming souls for Christ in the university system. That was the goal, right? And it was everything for the Lord and ad gloriam Dei, for the glory of God, right? And everything that they did and were supposed to be doing. When St. Francis de Sales was finally formed and he was sent off to the missions, St. Ignatius' last words to him were, set the world afire. And he did, as he went out there baptizing thousands in the missions, right? This incredible man, and so forth. Even our own country, we owe so much to the Jesuits. We have upstate New York, we have the shrine of the Jesuit martyrs who gave their lives in order to bring the people of this land to God's holy family, to bring them into the life of the church, to baptize them, and to continue the mission of Christ, to go forth and baptize all nations, right? So this beautiful work of the Jesuits that extended even here to our own country in the bringing of the people to the faith of Christ. I want to just focus on one thing as I rambled on for quite a bit, and that is the importance of spiritual reading, right? How important reading is. I remember as a child, we oftentimes spoke about the importance of reading, right? You'd have that bookmobile come by, the big truck would come by with all the books, and have the book sales, or they'd set up in the cafeteria of the school and the book sales, and they really pushed reading quite a bit, right? Because there was a problem with literacy, and they really wanted to make sure that our country became a literate culture, and it has, beautifully, right? The numbers are staggering of how we've changed from an illiterate culture to a literate culture, right? You know, Dolly Parton, for all of her craziness, she's generally a good woman, but when you go to her little place called Dollywood, if you're a little child under the age of 5, they sign up, you put your address in there, and she will send a book every month to that child until they turn 5, whenever they're under 5, until they turn 5. Free book every month, I think it's every month or something. My niece used to be part of it. She went there when she was little, and in order for her to encourage reading, because her father was illiterate, right? And so she wanted to make sure that she helped end illiteracy. Unfortunately, it's very important not just to be able to read, but to be able to read the right things, right? It's important to read what are the right and true things. When you look at the life of St. Teresa of Avila, she talks about how during her first years in the convent, she really got caught up reading the wrong things. She would read these other books, these other novels, whatever, and eventually they led her to a certain spiritual blasé where she lost the gift of contemplation. She lost the fire for her vocation. She lost the fire of that truly self-gifting to God because she was reading the wrong things. and then spending too much time at the parlor, not really paying attention to her spiritual life, but it led her into this malaise, this laziness, this slothfulness in reading the wrong things. And then the other day we talked about St. Maria Magdalene Martinengo, when she was discerning her vocation and trying to figure out what to do with her life. Her brothers gave her bad things to read, impure things to read, and it began to lead her away from her vocation, away from what God wanted of her, by reading the wrong things, right? And how important it is to read, not just be able to read, but to read the right things, right? If we have been given this particular gift of literacy, which really is a gift in so many ways, for the communication of the faith, for the communication of what is necessary for the growth in holiness, for the communication of that which could inspire us to become saints by reading the lives of the saints, or to learn our faith by reading theology, it becomes a serious matter when we have this gift and the Lord has gifted us with all the tools and we go, yeah, no. Or maybe later. Right? Or I'll get to it eventually. I mean, become slothful, right? We are responsible for the particular gift of our ability to read, our literacy, to then take what is there in front of us, like no other culture before us, and engage our intellect in the pursuit of truth, in the pursuit of holiness, in the pursuit of that which will inspire. Not just by reading, but by reading the right things, right? Even in the invention of the internet, there are a lot of things to read out there. We can learn the truths of the faith. I don't think there's any other culture before ourselves that's more responsible about being able to know the truth. I don't think there's ever been one. Because if I want to know what the church truly teaches about something, I just Google it and then I can read it. You know? We have more available, or I can just go to Amazon and order the book. You know, and then it's there. You know, not like in ancient centuries where I have to wait for some monks to finishing copying it over and over again, and then hopefully have enough money to buy it because it's so expensive, because it was very rare books. Right? We have an availability to be able to take this gift of literacy and aim it in such a direction that we should be the smartest culture in the history of humanity, and we're not, as much as we think we are, right? Our present day, even our greatest scientists, most brilliant people today can't hold a candle to people like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and so forth of the 13th century, right? We should be far exceeding and taking what they have and building and growing, but we've got into a malaise. Right? We've gotten these beautiful gifts from the God, and we've just taken it into this blasé, either reading the wrong things, or far worse in our culture today, not reading at all. More time is spent watching videos of cats holding on to ceiling fans as they spin around than they are reading the truths of the faith. More time is spent at the movies or in this or that than is spent sitting there and drinking in the truths of our faith, or the lives of the saints, or coming to know the beautiful realities of our faith and the deeper mysteries of our faith. You know, the mind is a muscle. It needs to be exercised. The intellect needs work, right, to really read and to absorb. We've come into a culture where we've gone into this, almost like this catatonic state, where we're just fed info, not even from the TV anymore, but from the phone. From it's just constant, and we don't actually even sit down and read. I actually had this out with seminaries in the sense that I talked to a seminary rector that I was very upset because the guys, not upset, just had the discussion, like, nobody reads anymore, even in seminary. When they write a paper, they just Google what they want to know, get a sentence from Googling it, and don't actually read. They're not reading St. Augustine's works on the Trinity. They're Googling, what did St. Augustine say on the Trinity? Sentence, okay, just cut and paste. You know, that's not doing theology, that's just getting a paper done so you can get a grade, right? The goal is to raise the mind to the truth, so that in that coming to know the truth, to enter into deeper contemplation of God and the deeper mysteries of God. When you look at St. Ignatius, he went from reading mere novels about, you know, heroic people to actually reading about true heroicism, which was the lives of the saints. And it was reading the lives of the saints that his heart was then set in the right direction. In contemplating the life of someone like Francis, someone like Dominic, he was like, I want to do that. because he read the truth and the truth spoke to him. Even Father Saladas Casey, he would read the works of St. Mary of Agreda, Venerable Mary of Agreda, the City of God, over and over again on his knees. He would read it and contemplate the life of our Lord and the life of Our Lady. And the theology that's contained within those 4 books was just incredible. The woman never studied St. Bonaventure, but she certainly had Franciscan theology down pat. Brilliant woman. Certainly inspired by God. Right? But it's important, especially if we have the gift of literacy. We stand before the Lord on the day of our judgment, and for the many things He'll ask of us, I wonder if that'll be that question. You were given the gift to be able to read, which centuries before you never had. You were literate. What did you read about the faith? Did you spend time reading of the faith? How did you come to know? Did you read the true teaching of the church? Did you read Scripture and study Scripture? Did you read the documents of the church where the church teaches on these various things? Did you read and go to the Catholic diction, the Catholic encyclopedia that has answers to these questions you had your whole life? Have you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church? Have you read the lives of the saints? Did you take the time? Right? I think a lot of times our failures in the growth in the spiritual life is because we just never took the time to actually come to the answers or to the truths, and the failure to actually enter into the beautiful gift of spiritual reading. And it's easy to become slothful about it, because reading does take work. It makes the mind work. And our minds are preoccupied with so many other things and so much other stuff going on, right? We invent all these things to slow our lives down, like the microwave, we can cook in seconds and so forth, and all these other things and gadgets, and we have less time than cultures before us. We have more things to give us more time. We have less time than any culture before us, right? And so we have no time to read. Well, do we? That's a decision, isn't it? Today, I just bring all of this up in his ramblings right now, because I was really thinking about and praying over what St. Ignatius said about how he read the lives of the saints, how it changed him. And I get to think about the importance of spiritual reading. Going back to our class that we had on the spiritual life, and how, Teresa of Avila was just reading the wrong things, and what that did to her spiritual life. Or the other homily we had the other day of Mary Magdalene Montenegro, and how she was given to read terrible things, which brought her into confusion and led her down a path that was not good. Right? And so the importance of reading, particularly when we have that gift of literacy, to allow the spiritual reading to lead us into contemplation of God, to lead us to the mystery who is God. So may St. Ignatius intercede for us today that he obtained for us every grace that we need to truly pick up that which is good, that which is holy, and read it well, and follow all that is good, all that is true, and all that is holy. May God bless you. Mary Keith.